Back in 2022, I covered some of the most disrespectful super moves in fighting games, and with all the comments about moves that I did not consider and how fun it was to cover, I wanted to double dip. We all love the flashiness of a good cinematic super move, and there's just something about those characters who add insult to injury when they beat you down. It's one thing to show off, but these characters basically disregard your value as a fighter and do something to embarrass or taunt you as they break you. I want to find more of those super moves where it's great to be a jerk. Also, one super per series of origin for this list, but moves from series that were represented in the previous video covering this topic are still eligible here. Now, let's regard the top 10 disrespectful fighting game super moves, Volume 2. Number 10.
Excellent!
KO.
Lee's rage art in Tekken 7 starts off pretty standard. He gives you a punch and some kicks, so it's shaping up to be your average cool Tekken super move, but then he stops for a second to give it that Lee charm. He pulls out a rose, throws it at his opponent in pain, turns his back, and then says he's done right before the rose explodes. Is the rose actually explosive, or is that just for dramatic effect? Either way, hitting your opponent with a normal flower when you could have just punched them instead is a nice display of disrespect. Dudley started the Rose's reign of terror in Street Fighter, where he throws a rose as his taunt, and if it hits the opponent when their health is low, they would get knocked out, so Lee takes that tactic to the extreme. Still, Dudley's rose can't explode, so Lee needed to add a bit of oomph to make it work. Or, I don't know, maybe the thorns just hurt a lot. Yu Yu Hakusho and G Gundam have taught me that roses make great weapons. Lee even used roses in Tekken 6 and Tekken Tag Tournament 2 as a secret part of his moveset, just not in a lethal way. Though even without the rose, Lee still has a bit of disrespect with this super, where he starts it off by turning his back right to the opponent's face and saying, "You think you can handle me?" So that's 2 back turns in one super move. I'm not surprised. Remember, this is the handsome guy who gives the screen a thumbs up and proudly says excellent in all his games, so this is par for the course. He's a nice guy, he just enjoys playing with his opponent.
Great. You win.
Excellent!
Number 9.
琥珀流抜刀術鬼このほうきに切れぬものなしラストアーフィニッシュ
This super is funny and cute. It's not meant to be some sort of serious disrespect to the honor of her fellow fighter, since Kohaku is one of the comic relief characters in Melty Blood type Lumina, but because a lot of the other fighters take themselves seriously, it accidentally has that air of disrespect to it with how she uses her opponent to do something goofy. I don't think she means to belittle them, she just wanted to show off her cool thing. Although the sly look she gives at the start of the super may mean she's very aware of what she's doing. She's like, I'm gonna be silly. She takes a samurai-inspired stance with her broom, sweeps a few slash marks across her opponent where it looks like she's going to do some sort of honorable finish, only to reveal, she painted a silly dragon around you. She then says something comedic that sounds dramatic, and ends it with an explosion of dust that sends you back from all the junk that she sweeped up. The start and the end make this super for me. It's just so fun, but being defeated by a silly dragon doodle in a game where characters are regularly impaled might be a strong hit against the ego. It's almost like she's disrespecting you by treating you like any other pile of dirt on the ground. From what I could find, her dramatic line that she says is something like, "There's nothing my broom cannot cut. Once again, I have cut something fun," which is supposed to be a parody of Goemon from Lupin III, who says, "Once again, I have cut something worthless," after he defeats an opponent. And to note, that's not the only thing she says here. She has a few other finishing lines, but the Goemon one is my favorite and the only one I know about offhand. And then you gotta love the Sailor Moon pose she does after it, followed by her coughing because the dust was too much even for her. It's just perfect for the tone of this super. It's hard to get annoyed at such a ridiculous defeat when you see how much fun Kohaku is having.
また楽しいものを切ってしまいましたラストアーフィニッシュ
ご苦労様だったな
やりました大勝利です
Number 8.
Flip the switch!
one thing when you lose a match and just the people in the vicinity know, but Teddy makes sure the whole world knows about your loss. In Persona 4 Arena and related fighting games, Teddy has a very comedic instant kill, which is a type of super move that wins you the game, but can only be used during the character's winning round when their meter is maxed out. He throws you into his Persona rocket with an active bomb and launches you. As you fly into the night sky, Teddy gives you a dramatic salute before it pans out to show us the status of your rocket trip. You turn into fireworks branded with his face, so now everyone looking at the night sky knows that Teddy just defeated someone off in the distance. I don't see how you survived this. Your last moments are culminated into a friendly bear pattern in the sky, and Teddy just yells, "Look at him go," as you explode. Though maybe you survive with cartoon logic. Teddy pulls out random items from nowhere and is essentially a cartoon character. He manifests baseball bats, boxing gloves, and missiles, just to name a few. Plus he starts off the super with a bomb from nowhere, so he's wacky enough where this may not be lethal, just painful. I think the biggest disrespect in this super move though is the salute he gives. It feels very sarcastic, like he's honoring your death that was all caused by him. Number 7.
You win!
Okay, I let off the food.
Welcome to a rare channel on YouTube that talks about aggressors of dark combat. The name sounds awkward, but that's because it was developed by ADK, who made the World Heroes fighting games, so they wanted the title to have the same initials as them. Not sure why they chose this game, but I guess I get it. It's one of many 90s fighting games that blends in with the genre at the time, with its main gimmick being that you could pick up weapons like in a beat-em-up. There were some other nuanced mechanics about how moves clash and grappling, but let's get into the characters. They were mostly big burly dudes who fit the street brawler delinquent archetype, but the character design that deviated the most was Kisara Westfield, a thin schoolgirl idol who could keep up with the muscle-bound characters thanks to the power of rushdown, heart projectiles, and I think she hits you with her butt. Now the super moves in this game get wacky all around and can instant kill the opponent if they're on their final health bar, but Kisara's is definitely the most memorable. Instead of going for a barrage of hits like the other characters, she goes for the heart. Her heart projectile causes her opponent to struggle for a second, and then they fall in love with her. While they're not looking, she summons an illusion of a handsome guy and makes out with him until they snap out of it and look over. The heartbreak from the jealousy is too much, where their body just kind of explodes a little. The point is, she's using Cupid's arrow for ulterior motives. Also the fact that she can just summon illusions, and instead of tricking you in a fight, she uses it for heartache. I don't know who the guy she summons is supposed to be, but he's cool enough where he's the best option to give any opponent overwhelming envy. Which means if she uses this super in a mirror match, the other Kisara will just get mad that someone else is with her man. Regardless, the disrespect in this emotional combat is strong, and it's only bolstered by the fact that if she wins, she points and laughs at you.
2-player win!
Number 6.
本気にさせたてめえが悪いんだぜ! Stab with the climax! Climax KO! Player 1 wins!
Yamazaki's max super move in the King of Fighters 15 has a few variations that all show off what makes him so brutal and disrespectful, smashing your face into the ground, stomping you while you're down, dragging you across the floor, and hitting you with speed beyond comprehension. He starts it all off by grabbing your face and slamming you so hard that you bounce up. What happens next depends on your command. With no command or one button, he stomps on you while you're down and then power punches you with some unspecified energy. The only difference between those variations of the super is the extra button press gives you a more dramatic angle with the stomping. As mentioned in the Hazama and Terumi segment in the other super move video, stomping someone while they're on the ground is a classic display of disrespect, and that's all over Yamazaki's moveset. To get to higher levels of this super move, you gotta mash buttons harder. The next level of the super has him grab a random item on the stage, whack the opponent with it, and then he does his energy punch. I like how he's so unhinged, he just has the urge to hit you with an object nearby. He doesn't care what it is. As long as it's hard, he's hitting you. And for the ultimate version of this super, he unleashes his crazy hands that punch you in rapid succession and does an energy punch, but instead of letting you fly back, he then grabs you and grinds you against the ground with an extra punch while you're down at the end for good measure. Dragging you against the ground is another Yamazaki specialty, so pick your favorite version of this super. I like the stomping and the dragging, but I wish he did them both in the same cutscene. I guess that's how he leaves us wanting more. This super was also prevalent in Yamazaki's appearances in the Fatal Fury series and other King of Fighters games, so he's been doing it since the 90s. However, the King of Fighters 15 version is my favorite due to all the camera angles it now has. You don't realize how screwed you are when this move connects until you see all those close-ups of his face. Number 5. Lobo is the alien bounty hunter who's rude, crude, and kinda lewd, it needed to rhyme, and he's going to beat you with whatever force he needs, though he also wants to have fun. He loves his job, and his backstory is very interesting in how indestructible they made him, where he was too much of a nuisance in hell after he was killed, so they just kicked him out of the afterlife, making him immortal basically. He's a fan of guns, chains, and just punching you, most of which are in his super move in Injustice, the DC Comics fighting game, but he replaces punching with his space motorcycle, one of his most beloved possessions. He stuns you with the chain, hits you with the motorcycle, and shoots you as you're falling. Pretty expected for a super move, but here's where him being a jackass comes into play. They land right behind his motorcycle, so he revs up his engine more than he needs to, and the flames and exhaust linger on the opponent. You're getting a bunch of bad stuff to the face right there. And I like the little laugh he does before he revs up his engine. He knows what he's about to do, and he's like, check this out, it'll be cool. Don't worry though, he's eventually going to take off, but before he does, a parting gift. He flips you off as he rides away, giving you the biggest insult to injury. He's saying screw you when the disrespect with the tailpipe wasn't already an implication of that. Also, the finger censorship is in the game, that's not my edit. I don't know if they had to blur it for the game's T rating, but I like to think that we're imagining seeing this super move as footage on one of those most wanted criminal programs before Lobo gets away, and they had to blur it because it was on network TV. Anyway, then Lobo rides off into the sunset, but runs back on screen a second later since he's in a fighting game.
They don't call me the main man for nothing.
Number 4.
決まったな決まったな
This super move from Lilith in Darkstalkers 3, aka Vampire Savior, is embarrassing for the opponent since it sets them up for failure. It's called Gloomy Puppet Show, and when Lilith connects by throwing her top hat, it forces the opponent into playing a rhythm game. First, they get put on a stage telling us it's showtime to an imaginary audience. Then the opponent defaults to one of their happier poses with a top hat on, and a random tune starts playing that they have to sync their movements to by pressing certain punch or kick buttons. However, the opponent has no control over their character. The rhythm game is actually played by whoever's using Lilith. I'm not sure if that means in-universe the opponent has no control over their body and Lilith is controlling them like a puppet, or if they're just performing on their own in attempts to appease Lilith after she forces them on stage. But regardless, the person who initiated this super is playing the rhythm game with the opponent's character. Now it's up to you to press punches and kicks in beat with the tune that plays, or just mash buttons to make your opponent do random things, or mash nothing and make your opponent stand there awkwardly. After the tune is over, Lilith will grade their performance, usually poorly, and then they will suffer some sort of punishment. If you do really poorly, you get the extra humiliation of the fake audience booing you as you fall down. If you do okay, there's a little clapping, which is almost as bad since the audience is like, well, I guess that you tried. The hardest thing about being stuck in this super move is no one knows how to react. You get like 1 second of prep time, and Lilith basically tells you if you don't get any of these beats, she's hurting you and giving you a bad score. I've never seen anyone react to this super move properly, so it always ends in failure. If you are ready for the super, the song that plays is randomized, so you still have to adjust with your ears right away. I've only ever seen one video explaining how you quote-unquote win this rhythm game, which is satisfying to the ears, but even if you do well, almost perfectly, Lilith still looks disappointed and gives you extra elemental attacks as damage, just with a more positive sign. So ultimately, it's a no-win scenario where you're just a fool for trying to play along. And really, it's no win for anyone, since for Lilith, this super move does poor damage overall and costs 2 bars of meter, so it's more inefficient than her other supers, and it has an awkward angle on startup, so it's prone to miss. In the end, the only reason to use this super is so you can style on your opponent with a game they were not planning to play. Number 3.
I wonder what you taste like.
The Majins in Dragon Ball have the signature power to turn people into assorted sweet treats, while in the anime and manga, it's basically a death sentence since they'll just devour you right away. They can't quite do that in a fighting game for the sake of balance, unless there's an instant kill mechanic, which Dragon Ball FighterZ does not have. So instead, they went the route of the opponent popping out from behind the Majin and just having the candy beam wear off after a few seconds so the match doesn't end right away. This still follows the lore since Vegeta was strong enough to maintain his sentience and most of his power after being turned into a jawbreaker by Super Buu, though Buu turned him back to normal willingly, so the candy beam wearing off on its own is just a video game thing. However, Majin 21 takes a creative route on why she doesn't just eat her opponent and end it with her sweet tooth super move. She starts by turning the opponent into a variety of confectionery treats like a tart or donut, takes a close-up bite, and instead of finishing you off when she has you in her grasp, she doesn't even bother and tosses you on the floor in disgust because you don't taste good enough. Forget that she basically had the fight won. If you're not the perfect level of sweetness for her, she doesn't care. You're trash to her and she'll use her other moves to finish you off. You at least help her recover a bit of health before she throws you aside, so you weren't a total waste. Though if you want some redemption, if this move is what ultimately knocks out the opponent, she takes that second bite and eats you with satisfaction, so there's a bit more respect with the KO. Well, as respectful as turning you into a pastry is.
Just scrumptious. It's your fault for challenging me.
Android 21! Win!
Number 2. Punching someone many times in a row is a common super move occurrence, but Abigail in Street Fighter V does it in the most humiliating way he can. He's the tallest character in the game, clocking in at bigger than you feet tall, it's the same in meters too, and from the chest above, he's about as wide as he is tall, with muscle. So to show off his height and strength, he lifts you up with ease to start off this super. It doesn't matter how big the opponent is, you're all getting the quick lift, but you're not going back down to the ground so quickly. He wanted to pick you up so he could hang you from an imaginary hook off screen, and then proceeds to punch you quickly as if you're a punching bag. This man turns you into a Looney Tunes gag. The super move goes as expected in the middle, whether you're a short character or a big character. But for that last hit, Abigail can't help himself and gives his opponent punching bag the biggest hit he can where they go flying in the other direction, but the only thing to stop them is the camera. They hit the player's screen screen and splat against it, breaking the camera's glass and letting your goofy defeat face get imprinted against it. As discussed on my Street Fighter 6 super move list, the screen splat super is a great recurring gag in modern Street Fighter games, but its ultimate embarrassment when the camera lingers on your face when it's in maximum pain hitting a solid object, and Abigail steps it up where he actually breaks that screen. That's a cutting hazard with all that broken glass, so there's an unintentional strategy there if you're trying to sneak in extra discomfort. For number 1, it was difficult to pick from all of these choices since each of them seemed like they were at the same level of disrespect, style, and maybe even comedy, so I just went with the game that felt right. Everything with this super was executed perfectly, from the poses to the voice to the animation to the character who does it. Number 1.
You win!
Dr. Doom is a lot of things. A scientist, a leader, a politician, a villain, even a bit of a sorcerer, but he's also arrogant, and for good reason. His technology combined with magic makes him a formidable foe, and his appearance in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 backs that up, where he's one of the best characters in the game, mostly due to his assists, but his combos can still go on forever thanks to his foot dives and photons. His level 3 hyper combo is a great visual display of his domination and is a nice way to end his combos with a bang. He's in full villain mode here, where he does nothing to fight on his own. He starts off by saying "time to die" as he summons a containment pod below the opponent, and then he takes a seat since he's so sure that his invention will beat you. He's now in a bored reclining pose as you get zapped a bunch, and while he could sit there all day watching you, he's got plans, so he presses the button, trademark, which delivers the final blow. But really, the fact that he gets so comfortable in the middle of this super is what makes it such a cool display of disrespect. You also gotta love that evil laugh he lets out in the middle of this super. That always gets you points on the arrogance scale, along with him yelling "this game is over" as he pushes the button, implying he could have flipped the death switch whenever he wanted, but he was just humoring you with a fight. Or maybe he knows this is actually a video game, but I don't think Doom is that omnipresent. Dr. Doom may be an enemy of the Fantastic Four first and foremost, but this super shows why you don't want him to be an enemy of you, capping off this list of disrespectful fighting game supers.
Danger! Hyper combo KO! You win!
Consider Doom merciful if you still draw breath.
Now, what did you think? Did all these super moves belittle the opponent properly, or were some of them more courteous than I made them out to be? What are some of your favorite disrespectful fighting game supers overall, whether I discussed them or not? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.